welcome to Reformed Thinking. I want you to imagine for a second that you are tasked with writing the opening lines of the universe.
Oh, wow. That is a massive blank page.
Right. I mean, not just a story and not just a biography, but the absolute definitive origin of all reality. What do you even say?
I mean, you'd have to start big.
Yeah.
Really big.
Exactly. And if we look at the other biographical accounts of Jesus' life in the New Testament, they all start in, very different ways.
They do. They have very different goals right out of the gate.
Yeah, like Mark kicks things off with immediate action. He's got a herald shouting in the desert, and he just drops you right into the ministry.
Boom, right into it. No backstory.
And then Matthew decides to build this deep foundation by starting with a really long linear family tree to prove a royal lineage.
Right, establishing those legal and historical credentials.
And Luke opens with this very formal, very historical disclaimer about his rigorous investigative process to get the facts straight.
Yeah, he's writing like a true first-century historian.
But then you turn to the Gospel of John. And John doesn't start in the desert.
No, he does not.
He doesn't start with a family tree. He doesn't even start in time.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. John shatters the entire timeline, pulling the reader completely outside of the bounds of human history. And he drops what is arguably the most massive philosophical and theological hand grenade of the first century.
That is a great way to put it, a total hand grenade.
So today's deep dive is into a text that is universally recognized as a cornerstone of the Christian faith. We are looking at the first 5 verses of the Gospel of John.
And those 5 verses are, without exaggeration, they are a cosmic paradigm shift.
They really are.
We're looking at a prologue that essentially functions as the lens through which you must view every single other thing that happens in the book.
It's the filter for everything else.
Exactly. If you do not have John chapter 1, verses 1 through 5 locked in your mind, then, well, the miracles of Jesus, his teachings, his claims, and ultimately his crucifixion and resurrection, they will all be fundamentally misunderstood.
Because you won't know who is actually doing them.
Precisely. John is establishing the absolute horizon of reality right here.
Which is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack these opening sentences, not as some dusty ancient religious preface.
Right. Not just throat clearing before the actual story starts.
Yeah, not just a throat clearing exercise, but as a cosmic declaration. We're going to see how John deliberately dismantles the prevailing ancient philosophies of his day.
He just tears them apart.
And we'll see how this text violently confronts our modern culture's absolute obsession with, personal autonomy and self-creation.
Oh, it really does. It strikes right at the heart of the modern ego.
And most importantly, we are going to explore how these ancient words provide an unbreakable objective anchor for those moments when your own life feels utterly and hopelessly chaotic.
It really is a text that demands a verdict from the reader. You can't just walk away neutral.
No, you really can't.
The sheer magnitude of the claims John makes right out of the gate about the nature of God, the origin of the physical universe, and the moral condition of humanity, it just does not allow you to remain a spectator in the audience.
Well, I want to start by putting us in the room, or I guess at least in the city where this text first landed.
The historical context is so crucial here.
Because we are talking about an ancient document. And to understand the impact of the words, we really have to understand the ears that first heard them.
Right. Who was the original audience?
So we're likely looking at the late 1st century, and the traditional view places John in Ephesus. But Ephesus isn't some quiet, sleepy, ancient backwater village where a few fishermen are hanging out, is it?
Not at all. 1st century Ephesus was a bustling, cosmopolitan Roman metropolis.
A massive city.
It was the absolute epicenter of trade in Asia Minor. Think of it like New York, London, and Tokyo rolled into one ancient city.
Wow. So just constant movement in commerce.
Exactly. And because it was a massive trade hub, it was also a marketplace of competing, colliding worldviews.
People bringing their gods and ideas from all over the empire.
Yeah, you had deep Greco-Roman paganism woven into the very fabric of daily life. The city was home to the Temple of Artemis, for instance.
Which is huge, right?
Massive. It was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Just an imposing structure that drove a massive economic engine of silversmithing and idol making.
So the religion was literally the economy.
It was everything. And alongside that, you had a heavy presence of the occult, emperor worship, and a really vibrant, deeply rooted Jewish community with its own synagogues.
It sounds like a total sensory overload of religion and philosophy. Like you're walking down the street and bumping shoulders with Roman soldiers, pagan priests, Jewish rabbis, and Greek philosophers all in the same block.
That is exactly what it was.
Yeah.
And into this specific, chaotic melting pot of ideas, John introduces his account of Jesus with one specific word.
The hand grenade.
The hand grenade. In Greek, it is the logos. Translated in our English Bibles, it is the word. In the beginning was the word.
But John didn't invent that term, did he?
No, not at all. He picked up a word that was already heavily loaded. It was deeply controversial and highly debated in the first century intellectual world.
Okay, let's break down the factions fighting over this word.
Yeah.
If I am a Greek Stoic philosopher sitting in the marketplace in Ephesus, and I hear John say the logos, what immediately comes to my mind?
So to the Stoics, the logos was essentially the impersonal, pantheistic, rational principle that governed the universe.
Like a cosmic law of physics.
Yes. They looked at the world and they saw order. They saw the seasons change with predictability. They saw the stars move in mathematical patterns.
It wasn't just random chance to them.
Right. They recognized that the universe wasn't pure chaos. There was an underlying logic to it. And they called that animating principle the logos. It was the spark of reason embedded in nature.
But it wasn't a god you could pray to, right?
That's the critical thing to understand. The Stoic logos was completely impersonal. It was a cold, deterministic force. It didn't love you. It didn't know you.
It didn't have a face.
No face, no will. It was simply the cosmic algorithm that kept everything running.
Okay, so the Greeks view it as this cosmic math. But then you have a completely different camp, the Hellenized Jews.
Right, a totally different perspective.
These are Jewish thinkers who are deeply influenced by Greek culture and Greek philosophy, most notably a philosopher named Philo of Alexandria.
Philo is a huge figure here.
And they are trying to reconcile the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob with the philosophies of Plato. So how do they use the term logos?
Well, Philo had a major philosophical problem he was trying to solve. In Greek thought, which was heavily influenced by Plato, pure spirit was considered good, elevated, and perfect.
But the physical stuff.
Yeah, physical matter, dirt, flesh, wood, stone, that was considered inherently corrupt, flawed, and dirty.
So there's this massive divide between the spiritual and the physical.
Exactly. So if you have a perfectly transcendent, pure spiritual God, how could that God possibly interact with a dirty physical universe to create it?
Because if he touches it, he gets dirty.
Right. A pure God couldn't touch impure matter without compromising his purity.
He needs a middleman.
Precisely. He needs a buffer. And Philo utilized the concept of a logos as that intermediary bridge. It was a semi-divine buffer zone between the transcendent creator and the corrupted creation.
So not fully God, but not fully creation either.
Yeah, for Philo, the logos was the first emanation of God, the instrument through which God made the world. But it was not God himself in essence.
Got it.
It was a lesser derivative being that allowed God to interact with the world without getting his hands dirty, so to speak.
This is just brilliant because John looks at the Stoics and he looks at Philo and he essentially hijacks their vocabulary.
Hijacks is the perfect word.
He uses a word they are entirely obsessed with, but he completely redefines its meaning by, bypassing Athens and rooting it firmly in the Hebrew Old Testament.
That is the absolute genius of the prologue. To truly understand John's logos, you can't stop at Greek philosophy. You have to understand the Hebrew concept of the memra in Aramaic or the dabar in Hebrew.
The spoken word of God.
Yes. In the Old Testament, the word of Yahweh is not a cold cosmic algorithm, and it certainly isn't a lesser created buffer zone. The word of the Lord is active, dynamic, and intensely personal.
It actually does things.
It creates reality. When God speaks in the Old Testament, reality changes. Genesis 1. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Psalm 33 says, "By the word of the Lord the heavens were made."
And throughout the prophets, you see this phrase constantly. The word of the Lord came to Jeremiah, or the word of the Lord came to Ezekiel.
Right, it arrives almost like a person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It almost reads as if the word has a personal agency of its own. It acts, it reveals, it brings judgment, and it saves.
Yes. The word in the Hebrew mind is the powerful, effective self-expression of God. So when John writes, "In the beginning was the Logos," the Stoic leans in thinking John is about to talk about cosmic math.
And the Hellenized Jew leans in thinking John is about to talk about the semi-divine middleman.
And John entirely blindsides them both by saying, no, the Logos is the personal, dynamic, creative power of the God of Genesis. And as he will reveal in verse 14, this ultimate word just took on human flesh and walked among us.
Which is just scandalous to the Greek mind.
Yeah,
God taking on flesh.
completely offensive to them.
The structural way John builds this argument is really fascinating too, because it's not just the vocabulary he uses, it's how he links the words together.
The literary architecture is stunning.
I was reading about how this prologue is considered a literary masterpiece because of a technique called stechometric stair-step parallelism.
It's an incredibly sophisticated poetic structure. A lot of scholars just call it staircase parallelism to keep it simple.
Staircase parallelism, how does that work?
In this technique, a significant word at the very end of one clause is picked up and used as the foundational starting point for the very next clause. You literally step up word by word, concept by concept.
It's like a chain where each link interlocks perfectly with the next one.
Exactly. Let's look at how John executes this. He starts with the word. In the beginning was the word. Then he connects the word to God. And the word was with God, and the word was God.
Okay, so word to God.
Then he connects God to creation. All things came into being through him. Then creation is connected to life. In him was life.
Creation to life.
That life is then connected to light. And the life was the light of men. And finally, the light descends into the darkness, and the light shines in the darkness.
It is a deliberate theological descent. Like, he is walking the reader's mind down a staircase that starts in the unapproachable, timeless depths of eternity, moves through the creation of the physical cosmos, and lands squarely in the moral conflict of human history.
The light colliding with the darkness.
Right. And this brings us back to why John does this. The Gospel of John is not merely historical reporting. It is intense theological revelation. He is deliberately echoing the very first words of the Bible.
Oh, absolutely. The parallel is unmissable.
Both Genesis 1 and John 1 start with the exact same Greek phrase in the Septuagint translation. And archa, in the beginning. But there is a massive contrast in direction here.
That's the key. Genesis starts at the beginning and traces history downward into time. You know, day 1, day 2, day 3, humanity, the fall, the flood, the patriarchs. It's moving forward chronologically.
But John does the exact opposite.
He does. John starts at that exact same absolute beginning, and he looks upward. He looks backward into the timeless depths of eternity. Genesis shows us what happened when time started. John pulls the curtain back and shows us who was already there before the clock even began ticking.
I love thinking about this like a cinematic opening crawl.
Oh, like a sci-fi movie?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
If you go see a massive sci-fi epic, the theater gets dark, the screen is black, and before you see a single character, before a line of dialogue is spoken, this massive wall of text crawls up the screen, giving you the cosmic backstory.
Setting the stakes.
Right. It tells you the stakes of the universe you are about to enter. John 1.1 through 5 is the opening crawl for ultimate reality.
I love that analogy.
Before we see Jesus walking the dusty roads of Galilee, before we see him turning water into wine, and before we see him weeping at the tomb of a friend, John gives us this cosmic backstory.
So we aren't confused about what we are looking at.
Yes. He does this so that when we finally see this man from Nazareth, we know exactly who is wearing the human flesh.
And the implication for the listener is profound. If you are someone trying to make sense of who Jesus is, this text absolutely refuses to let you categorize him neatly alongside other historical figures.
You can't just put him on a shelf with Socrates or Gandhi.
No, you can't. If you have been carrying around a version of Jesus who is just, a really brilliant life coach, a subversive social revolutionary, or an enlightened moral philosopher, John is telling you that your categories are catastrophically small.
Because a life coach doesn't exist outside of time.
Exactly.
And a moral philosopher didn't speak the Andromeda Galaxy into existence.
Precisely. A Jesus who is merely a good moral teacher cannot raise the dead. He cannot bear the infinite wrath of God against sin, and he certainly cannot grant eternal life to anyone.
He'd just be a guy with good advice.
Right. But the Jesus of John's prologue is the sovereign Lord of all reality, and that demands a completely different kind of response from us than we would give to a mere philosopher.
Well, let's lean into the actual mechanics of these first two verses, because the grammar John uses is notoriously simple on the surface, but it's just bottomless in its theological depth.
The grammar is where the battle lines are really drawn.
We need to look at how he establishes the uncompromised deity of the Word, because every single word here is chosen with surgical precision.
The precision is staggering, especially when we look at the verbs. In the Greek language, there's a fundamental difference between two specific verbs that John intentionally contrasts throughout this entire prologue.
Okay, what are they?
The first is eimi, which means to be or was. The second is ginomai, which means to become, to happen, or came into being.
The difference between being and becoming. It sounds like a really subtle philosophical distinction, but it carries massive weight here.
It is the difference between the creator and the created. That's the weight. When John writes about the word in verse 1, he uses the imperfect tense of the verb ei. In the beginning was the word.
Meaning continuous action.
Yes. The imperfect tense in Greek expresses continuous, ongoing action in past time. Generally saying that if you stretch your imagination as far back into eternity past as you possibly can, to the very moment creation was spoken into existence, the word didn't start there.
He was already there.
The word already was. He was already existing in a state of continuous being.
So he didn't have a start date.
Exactly. He is eternal. But whenever John talks about anything else, the universe, humanity, even John the Baptist later in the chapter, he completely switches his verb. He uses ginomai.
Things came into being.
Right. They had a starting point. They passed from non-existence into existence.
So John is drawing this hard, impenetrable line. The Word never began to exist. Everything else in the universe began to exist, but the Word eternally was.
And that grammatical distinction is the absolute bedrock of Orthodox Christology. There was never a time when the Son was not. He is eternally self-existent.
Which just blows your mind when you really dwell on it.
It does. But John doesn't stop there. He immediately follows this with two statements that, to a modern ear, might sound completely paradoxical.
Okay, lay them out.
He says, the Word was with God. And then he immediately says, the Word was God.
Let's break those two phrases down, because how can someone be with someone else and simultaneously be that person? Are we talking about two gods? Are we talking about one person who just has different titles?
This is where we see the magnificent seed of the doctrine of the Trinity planted right in the very first verse. When John says, the Word was with God, he uses a very specific Greek preposition, pros, with the accusative case pros, ton theon.
Pros ton theon, what does that signify?
Well, in English can just mean proximity. I am standing with a lamp in my room. But in this Greek construction, it implies dynamic, face-to-face, intimate communion between persons. It implies a living relationship.
So it demands a personal distinction. The Word is not the Father.
Correct. The Word is a distinct person from the Father, and they exist in eternal relationship. This explicitly refutes a very old theological error known as modalism, or Sabellian modalism.
Modalism. I think people still struggle with this today without knowing the word for it.
Oh, it's incredibly common today. Modalism teaches that God is just one single person who occasionally wears different masks or operates in different modes depending on what he is doing.
So sometimes he's the Father, sometimes the Son.
Exactly. Sometimes he puts on the Father mask to create the world. Sometimes he puts on the Son mask to die on the cross. And sometimes the Spirit mask to dwell in the church.
Like an actor playing 3 different roles in a play.
Right, which is a terrible way to understand God because it destroys the eternal relationship within the Godhead. If God is just one person playing different roles, then who is Jesus praying to in the Garden of Gethsemane?
Was he just talking to himself?
That's what modalism ultimately reduces to. But John obliterates modalism with this one phrase. Pros, ton theon. The Word was with God in face-to-face communion. They are distinct persons.
But the moment you establish that they are distinct persons, the immediate danger is polytheism. Someone might think, okay, so we have God the Father, and we have this distinct word person. We have 2 gods.
That's the natural human jump to make.
But John pivots immediately to absolute unity in essence.
Yes, he does. And the Word was God. Theos on ho logos. Having established a distinction in person, he now establishes absolute unity in nature.
So they are distinct in person, but one in essence.
Exactly. And this second statement refutes the opposite error of modalism, which is Arianism. Arianism, famously taught by an elder named Arius in the 4th century, argued that Jesus was a created being.
That he had a beginning.
Yes. Arius said Jesus was the highest, greatest first creation of God, but he was still a creature. Arius famously chanted, "There was a time when he was not."
And Arianism never really died out, did it? It just put on different clothes throughout history.
It's remarkably persistent.
Which brings up a very practical translation issue. If anyone listening has ever had a knock on their front door on a Saturday morning from the Jehovah's Witnesses, they have encountered modern-day Arianism.
Yes, they absolutely have.
Their translation of the Bible, the New World Translation, actually alters this specific verse to fit that theology. They translate it as, "In the beginning the Word was, and the Word was with God, and the Word was a God," with a little g.
Yes, they do. And they base that translation on a structural reality in the Greek text. In that final clause, the word was God. The Greek word for God, the hos, lacks a definite article. It doesn't say hol theos, which means the God.
So they look at that missing article and say it means a god.
Right. Because the definite article is missing, they argue it should be translated indefinitely.
But the vast majority of Greek scholars, and virtually every major Orthodox translation, completely rejects that. Why is adding that little letter A such a catastrophic error, grammatically speaking?
Well, it's a massive error for several reasons. First, it ignores a well-established principle of Greek grammar known as Colwell's rule.
Colwell's rule.
Yes. This rule, formulated by E.C. Colwell, states that when a definite predicate nominative, in this case theos, precedes the verb to be, which here is unen, it typically drops the definite article. It simply doesn't need the article to be definite in that specific grammatical construction.
Okay, so it's grammatically sound to translate it God without the article.
Mm-hmm.
But even beyond a dusty grammar rule, leaving the article out actually seems to be a stroke of theological genius on John's part to protect the Trinity.
It absolutely is. I mean, think about what would happen if John had included the definite article. What if he had written, the Word was the God?
Well, if he said the Word was the God, he would be saying the Word is the exact same person as the God he's just with. He would be equating their persons completely.
Precisely. If he included the article, he would be teaching modalism. He would be destroying the personal distinction he literally just established 3 words earlier.
Wow. So he drops it intentionally.
Yes. By intentionally dropping the definite article and throwing the word theos to the very front of the clause for maximum emphasis, John is highlighting the nature or the essence of the word. He is saying that all that God is, the Word is.
Same essence, distinct person.
Exactly. The Word possesses the exact identical divine nature as the Father without being the same person.
Let me try an analogy here to see if this helps clarify it for anyone listening who might be getting lost in the grammar.
Analogies are great for this.
Think about the difference between identifying someone and describing their essence. If I point to a man and say, that man is the president, I am identifying him as the one specific singular person who holds that office.
Right.
But if I listen to a speech by a leader and I say that man is presidential, I'm describing his nature, his character, his essence.
That is an excellent way to think about it. John is not saying the Word is the entire Godhead, the president. He is saying the Word is fully, entirely divine in his essence presidential. He shares the exact nature of the Father. He's uncreated, infinite, and eternal.
But let's bring this down to the street level for a second. Someone is listening to us debate Greek articles and ancient heresies, and they are thinking, I have a mortgage to pay. I have kids who won't sleep. The world feels like it's falling apart.
Oh.
Why does this intense doctrinal precision about the nature of Jesus matter to my actual daily life? Can't I just appreciate Jesus as a great moral example and leave the Greek grammar to the theologians?
It matters deeply because a false Christ cannot save you. It all comes down to the weight of human sin and the requirements of redemption.
The actual mechanism of salvation.
Exactly. If Christ is merely a creature, even the highest, most glorious creature in the universe, he is finite. And a finite creature cannot bear the infinite weight of the wrath of a holy God against sin.
A creature can't pay an eternal debt.
Only the infinite creator can bear the sins of his creatures, conquer death, and actually grant eternal life.
A casual Christology produces a casual Christianity.
That's exactly it. If your Jesus is just a life coach or a really empathetic friend, then when you face true tragedy, true darkness, or the terrifying reality of your own mortality, a life coach is entirely useless to you.
You don't need a pep talk when you're facing the grave.
You don't need advice in the face of death. You need a resurrection, and only the eternal God can provide that. John is giving the reader a Christ who is massive enough, sovereign enough, and divine enough to anchor your soul in the darkest possible moments of human existence.
That perfectly bridges us to the next logical reality in the text. If the Word is eternally God and absolutely not a created being, then what exactly is his relationship to this physical universe we live in?
We move from eternity to creation.
Right. We move from the internal, eternal relationship within the Trinity in verses 1 and 2 to the external act of creation in verse 3. And this is where John destroys the illusion of human autonomy.
Verse 3 states, all things came into being through him.
This is the positive assertion. Everything that exists owes its existence to the Word.
Right. But John is a master of emphasis, so he immediately reinforces that positive assertion with a comprehensive negative exclusion to make sure there are absolutely no loopholes in our understanding.
He locks every door.
He does. He adds, and apart from him, nothing came into being that has come into being.
The phrasing there is watertight.
Yeah.
Nothing that has come into being. It firmly places Christ on the creator side of the unbridgeable divide between creator and creature.
Yes, Christ is not the first thing created. He is the agent by which everything in the category of created came to exist.
And this dual phrasing utterly dismantles several major worldviews simultaneously. We mentioned earlier that in the ancient world, Gnosticism and Greek philosophy viewed physical matter as evil or corrupt.
The physical world was dirty to them.
Right. They believed the supreme God would never touch physical stuff. So the material world must have been created by a lesser, flawed, incompetent deity, a demiurge.
And John looks at that worldview and shatters it completely. John asserts that the physical world, the jagged mountains, the deep oceans, the stars, the microscopic atoms in a leaf, they were all deliberately spoken into existence by the eternal, perfect Word.
Matter is not inherently evil.
No, it is the masterpiece of Christ. This perfectly aligns with what the Apostle Paul writes in Colossians 1:16, where he says that by him all things were created, both in the heavens and on earth, visible and invisible. All things have been created through him and for him.
It also serves as a massive collision with modern evolutionary naturalism, which views the universe as a blind, unguided cosmic accident.
The prevailing view today.
Yeah, the secular narrative is that we are the result of time plus chance plus matter, just a lucky combination of atoms in a cold, indifferent universe. John says, no, the universe is the deliberate, intentional, and purposeful product of the eternal Son.
And this forces a confrontation with modern culture's absolute favorite myth, the myth of absolute personal autonomy. We are constantly fed a narrative today that says, my life belongs entirely to me. I am the captain of my soul. I forge my own destiny. I define my own truth.
The self-made man or woman. It is the core dogma of our age. We view ourselves as autonomous individuals who have the right to construct reality however we see fit. So how does John 1.3 just entirely wreck that worldview?
It wrecks it because it reveals that your very existence is derivative. If all things came into being through him, that inherently includes you.
You didn't make yourself.
You exist at this very second because Christ willed that you should exist. Your mind is not self-originating. Your talents and abilities are not self-generated. The electrical impulses firing in your brain right now to process this conversation are sustained by the Word. You are not autonomous. You are a creature.
Think about it this way. We walk around every day acting like we are the authors of our own story. We think we are sitting at the desk, holding the pen, writing the chapters of our lives, entirely in control of the narrative.
That's how we all naturally operate.
But John 1.3 pulls the camera way back and shows you the entire desk. You aren't the author. You don't hold the pen. You are the ink. You are the paper. You are a character in a narrative written by a sovereign creator.
That's a very humbling perspective.
It is. We owe absolutely every microsecond of our existence to the Word.
And practically speaking, the application of that truth is profound creaturely humility. The secular culture views humility as a weakness, but biblically it is simply acknowledging reality.
It's just telling the truth about who you are.
Exactly. Your body, your bank account, your intelligence, your time, these are not autonomous possessions that you manifested out of nothing. They are entrusted gifts from a creator who owns you by right of creation. We are stewards, not sovereigns.
But there is a massive comfort in that loss of autonomy, isn't there? Because the burden of having to invent yourself, sustain yourself, and direct your own destiny is actually crushing.
It leads to so much modern anxiety.
Exactly. When your life descends into chaos, when the medical test results come back with terrifying news, when you lose your job unexpectedly, or when the political landscape seems to be spinning completely out of control, we don't have to rely on blind crossing our fingers optimism or our own fragile ability to manage our lives.
No, you get to rest in the sovereign competence of the Creator. The one who redeemed you on the cross is the exact same one who engineered the intricate cellular structure of your body.
Wow.
Your circumstances might profoundly confuse you, but they do not confuse Christ. The world may feel unstable, but the Creator who holds the universe together by the word of his power is not unstable.
He's not pacing the floor in heaven.
No, he's not. When you embrace John 1.3, you stop trusting in your own feeble ability to control your life, and you place your trust entirely in the one who spoke galaxies into existence. It is a profoundly restful theology.
Having established Christ as the sovereign creator of all external physical reality, John now narrows the focus. He moves from the cosmos to what resides inside the Word and how that internal reality impacts humanity directly.
He zooms in on the life itself.
Right. In verse 4, he writes, "In him was life, and the life was the light of men."
The Greek word John uses here for life is very specific. He uses the word zoe. Now, in Greek, you could use the word bios, which is where we get the word biology.
Biological life.
Yes, bios refers to mere biological animation, a plant growing, an animal breathing, a heart beating. But zoe, in this specific context, refers to uncreated, self-existent divine life. The theological term for this is aseity.
Aseid. Let's unpack that because it's one of those beautiful ancient words that perfectly describes the distinction between God and us.
Aseity means that God has life in and of himself. He is entirely independent and self-sufficient. Think of every single created thing in the universe. Everything is contingent.
We all rely on something else.
Everything requires an external source to stay alive. A plant needs sunlight and water. You and I need oxygen, food, and water. If you unplug a lamp from the wall, the light goes out because it possesses no energy of its own. We are all plugged into an external power source.
But the Word is not.
The Word doesn't have a battery that needs recharging. He doesn't need to be fed. He is the uncaused cause, the absolute fountain of all existence. In him was life.
He is the fountain, we are the cups.
That's right.
And John connects this self-existent life directly to humanity. He says, "And the life was the light of men."
In the Gospel of John, light is deeply symbolic. It is synonymous with truth, holiness, moral purity, and the revelation of God. What John is saying is that the self-existent life of the Creator is the singular source of all human illumination.
The singular source, not one of many.
Exactly. If you want to know what is true, what is good, what is beautiful, you must look to the life of the Word. And by stating this so exclusively, John is exposing the deep underlying root of human idolatry.
Because we constantly look everywhere but the Word for that life and light. We look to created things.
Constantly. Idolatry at its core is demanding that a created thing provide you with the infinite life and light that can only come from the uncreated Creator.
We want finite things to give us infinite joy.
We do. We look at our bank accounts, our career trajectories, our romantic relationships, our political ideologies, and we say, if I just get this promotion, if I just marry this person, if my candidate just wins, then I will have life. I will have peace. I will be fulfilled.
We treat them like saviors.
We are asking finite, created things to do a job they simply do not have the capacity to do.
And when we do that, we inevitably crush those things under the weight of our expectations.
Exactly. They break under the weight. John is planting the theological seed here in verse 4 that will grow throughout his entire gospel. Jesus will constantly point back to this reality. When the crowds are hungry, he doesn't just offer them physical bread. In John 6, he says, I am the bread of life.
When he's speaking in the temple, he says in John 8, I am the light of the world.
And standing in front of a dead man's tomb in John 11, he doesn't just promise a future resurrection. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. He is claiming to embody the uncreated life of God.
This challenges the modern cultural narrative in such a profound way. We are surrounded by a culture that is absolutely obsessed with subjective, internal truth. You hear phrases like, discover your truth from within, or live your authentic truth.
Which assumes the truth is hiding inside you.
Right. The assumption is that truth and meaning are things you generate internally, from your own desires or feelings. But John is arguing the exact opposite. Truth is objective, it is external, and it originates exclusively in the eternal Word.
If you look inside, you won't find light.
Exactly. If you want light, you don't look inward into the dark labyrinth of your own heart. You look outward to the blazing light of the eternal sun.
Which brings up a very practical tension for the believer living in this world.
Yes, let's explore that tension, because we all enjoy the good things in life. I love my family. I enjoy the satisfaction of doing a job well. I love a good meal with friends.
As you should.
But if Christ is the exclusive source of life, are we supposed to view the physical world with suspicion? Are we supposed to withdraw from society, become ascetic monks, and focus purely on this abstract divine life?
Not at all, and that's a critical distinction to make. John just told us in verse 3 that the Word created the physical universe. The creation is intrinsically good. The biblical worldview calls for rightly ordered loves, not asceticism.
Rightly ordered loves, I like that.
It is entirely appropriate and, in fact, commanded to enjoy creation as a gracious gift from the Creator. You should enjoy a beautiful sunset, relish a good meal, and love your spouse deeply. But, and this is the dividing line, you must not ask creation to be your savior.
Don't elevate it to God's status.
You must not demand infinite, ultimate satisfaction from a finite, temporal thing.
Because it will eventually fail you.
It has to fail you. Finite things will always break if you put the infinite weight of your soul on them. A spouse makes a wonderful partner, but a terrible God. A career can be an excellent way to serve your community, but it is a horrific taskmaster of an idol.
So enjoy the gifts, but worship the giver.
Enjoy the gifts immensely, but seek your ultimate life and identity only in the giver of the gifts.
This leads us to the inevitable climax of the prologue. If Christ brings this pure, blazing, self-existent life and light into humanity, what happens when it hits a world that is deeply flawed, broken, and in active rebellion?
You get a cosmic collision.
You get a war. Verse 5 sets up the core conflict of the entire gospel narrative, and really the core conflict of human history. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it.
The first thing to note here is the tense John uses. He shifts to the present tense. The light shines. It indicates a continuous, ongoing, unquenchable action. The light entered the world, it is currently shining, and it never stops shining, regardless of the opposition.
And John's concept of darkness is really profound here. He isn't just talking about a neutral absence of photons. He isn't talking about a room where someone just forgot to turn on the lamp.
No, in the theology of John, darkness is a moral reality. It is not passive, it is active. It represents unbelief, falsehood, sin, and a hostile rebellion against the authority of God.
It's an act of resistance.
Yes. Later, in John 3:19, John explicitly diagnoses the human condition when he writes, "This is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and men loved the darkness rather than the light, for their deeds were evil." The darkness is not a victim of circumstance. The darkness is a chosen rebellion.
Humanity doesn't just stumble in the dark. We actively pull the blinds shut and lock the door because we love the dark.
Exactly. We want to hide our deeds. And into that act of rebellion, the light shines. And then John gives us this incredible triumphant phrase, "And the darkness did not overcome it."
Let's look at the Greek word used there for overcome. I understand it is a notoriously rich word that translators have debated for centuries because it carries a dual meaning.
Yes, the Greek word is katalambin, from the verb katalambano. It can mean to comprehend, to understand, to mentally grasp. But it can also mean to overcome, to master, to seize with hostile intent, to lay hold of in order to destroy.
So is John saying the darkness didn't understand the light, or is he saying the darkness couldn't defeat the light?
In the genius of John's writing, it is wonderfully and simultaneously both. The darkness utterly fails to comprehend or understand the light.
Like it just can't compute what Jesus is doing.
Right. You see this dynamic constantly throughout the rest of the gospel. Jesus teaches deep spiritual truths, and the religious leaders, the crowds, and even the disciples constantly misunderstand him on a purely carnal, physical level. They are blind to his reality. But simultaneously, and more importantly, the darkness completely fails to defeat, quench, or conquer the light.
The darkness is both spiritually blind and ultimately impotent.
Exactly. And if we take this abstract theological statement in verse 5 and lay it over the actual historical narrative of the gospel, it is just breathtaking. John is setting up the climax of his entire book right here in the introduction.
Because the crucifixion looks like the darkness winning.
To the naked human eye, the events of Good Friday look exactly like the darkness winning a decisive victory over the light. The crowds demand his blood, the Romans scourge him, he is nailed to a cross, and he dies.
John even weaves that imagery into the narrative leading up to it. When Judas leaves the Last Supper to go betray Jesus to the authorities, John includes this chilling, deeply symbolic little detail. He writes, "And it was night."
The darkness making its ultimate move. Bethlehem is the light entering the world. The cross is the darkness assaulting that light with every ounce of hostility it can muster. The darkness tries to seize, master, and extinguish the light.
But then Sunday morning happens.
But Sunday morning, the resurrection, is the eternal, objective proof that the darkness could not overcome the light.
This gives us such a realistic biblical doctrine of humanity. I think a lot of times modern Christians operate on the assumption that if we just present the truth of Christianity clearly enough, nicely enough, or logically enough, everyone will naturally accept it.
We think we just need a better marketing campaign.
Exactly. We assume people are basically good, just slightly misinformed. But John shatters that naivete. People actively love the darkness. There is a deep moral rebellion in the human heart. Presenting the blazing truth of Christ will inevitably provoke hostility.
And that reality is incredibly relevant to the listener today, especially when we look at how the church interacts with a hostile culture.
Let's bring this down to earth for the listener right now. If you are watching the news, looking at the cultural shifts, or perhaps you are facing intense, agonizing personal darkness, a brutal medical diagnosis, a fractured family, or deep depression.
Those moments are incredibly hard.
In those moments, it really, truly feels like the darkness is winning. It feels heavy, suffocating, and victorious. How does John 1.5 act as an anchor and a pastoral comfort in those exact moments?
It anchors you by reminding you of an objective, cosmic reality that entirely supersedes your subjective feelings and your temporary circumstances. You're right, it often feels like darkness is winning. But John 1.5 tells us the final score before the game is even over.
Settled fact.
Furthermore, it teaches us how light actually operates. Light does not defeat darkness by negotiating with it. Light does not defeat darkness by adopting the tactics of the darkness or by becoming a little bit dimmer and grayer to seem more relatable to the culture. Light defeats darkness simply by shining.
And the church today is so deeply tempted toward pragmatism. When we face cultural pushback, the temptation is to think, well, the culture finds biblical truth offensive. They find the exclusive claims of Christ intolerant. So maybe we should soften the edges.
Compromise the message a bit.
Yeah, maybe we should focus purely on our branding or having the best entertainment or maximizing attendance numbers by removing the offense of the cross. We try to decorate the darkness with religious language rather than shining a light on it.
But John 1.5 calls for unapologetic, uncompromised shining. Our task as believers is not to make Christ acceptable or palatable to the darkness. Our task is to faithfully proclaim the Christ who is light.
The darkness will react how it's going to react.
And darkness will react how the darkness reacts. But the ultimate comfort for the believer is this. Your hope in this life is not grounded in a naive, fragile optimism that things will look better tomorrow.
Tomorrow might be worse.
It very well might be. Our hope is grounded in an objective, historical, cosmic fact. The darkness cannot conquer Christ. You can share the gospel in a hostile workplace, you can stand for biblical truth in a compromised culture, and you can endure profound personal suffering all without an ounce of despair, because the final verdict has already been written in eternity. The light is unconquerable.
Which brings us to the ultimate verdict for every person listening. We have to bring this entire cosmic journey to its climax by connecting the theology of the prologue to the historical person of Jesus and the direct, unavoidable demand it places on your life today. We have to connect verse 1 directly to verse 14.
Because verse 1 without verse 14 is just philosophy. John 1.1 says, "In the beginning was the Word." John 1.14 says, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us."
The eternal became temporal.
The eternal, uncreated, self-existent, life-giving light actually became a human being.
This is where the theology lands with earth-shattering force. The baby lying in the feeding trough in Bethlehem did not begin to exist at Bethlehem. He is the eternal Word.
The one who spoke the stars into being is crying for milk.
Exactly. The man sitting exhausted by a well in Samaria is the uncreated creator who spoke the oceans into existence. The man weeping at Lazarus' tomb is the very fountain of life itself. And most staggeringly, the man hanging on the cross, bleeding, suffocating, and bearing the wrath of God is the creator of the wood he is nailed to.
That is just, it's overwhelming to think about.
He created the iron that is piercing his wrists. He sustains the very breath of the men who are mocking him.
That is what theologians call the hypostatic union. Christ is truly God and truly man, two distinct natures united in one glorious person. And we must always remember the goal of this theology. Why did John write this incredibly deep, philosophically and grammatically dense prologue?
It wasn't just for academic debate.
No, he didn't write it to satisfy our metaphysical curiosity. He didn't write it so he could win debates against Greek philosophers. Near the end of his book, in John 20.31, he tells us his explicit purpose. "These have been written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name."
The text demands a verdict. Neutrality is an illusion. Once you have seen who the Word truly is, you are forced to make a choice.
You cannot stay on the fence.
You must either remain in the darkness, clutching your illusions of autonomy, hiding your sins, and trying to be your own creator, or you must surrender and receive the light. And for the believer, for the person who says, yes, I believe that Jesus is the eternal Word, there is a massive, ongoing daily application. You are called to walk in the light.
To actually live in that reality.
That means actively exposing your hidden sins to the light of Christ. It means dragging the pornography, the greed, the secret resentments, the pride, and the unforgiveness out of the shadows.
Exactly. You stop trying to manage the darkness or negotiate a truce with it. You allow the light to expose it and eradicate it.
So, bringing this to a sharp point for the listener, if we take all this incredibly deep theology, the eternal existence of the Word, the uncreated creator, the source of life, the unconquerable light, how should it fundamentally rearrange the way a listener wakes up and lives tomorrow morning?
Well, if Jesus Christ is the eternal God and the sovereign creator of the universe, then you must wake up tomorrow and worship him with absolute reverence and awe. It means you submit every single area of your life to his lordship.
Every area. No compartments.
Your finances, your relationships, your career, your private thoughts, they all belong to him by right of creation and by right of redemption. It means you completely stop expecting the secular culture to define what is true, what is moral, and what is valuable.
You stop looking to the darkness for light.
Exactly. You let the eternal Word define reality for you. And it means you evaluate absolutely everything in your life by its relationship to the Son. Ask yourself continually, is this habit, this relationship, this pursuit drawing me toward the unconquerable light, or is it pulling me back into the impotent darkness?
What an incredible journey we've been on today. We started in eternity past, before time itself even existed. We witnessed the creation of the cosmos through the power of the Word. We saw that Word become the very fountain of life and the light of truth for humanity.
And we followed that light all the way down.
We followed that unconquerable light right down into the gritty, hostile, bloody reality of human history, where the Creator took on flesh to wage a war against the darkness, a war he conclusively won.
The Prologue of John truly is the theological foundation of the universe. When you grasp it, it changes the way you see everything.
It changes everything.
Yeah.
It means you are not an accident. Your life is not a cosmic coincidence generated by blind forces. You were created by the Word, and you are sustained by the Word. And it means that the darkness you see raging in the world around you, the darkness you feel battling in your own heart, does not have the final say.
The light is unconquerable.
The light is unconquerable. But as we close today, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought. A question directly inspired by this magnificent text for you to mull over as you go about your day. We've established that the light of Christ is truly unconquerable, and it is continuously, relentlessly shining, exposing all things. So what specific secret darkness in your own life are you still desperately trying to preserve while claiming to have fellowship with the light?
That is the question we all have to answer.
It is time to drop the exhausting illusion of autonomy. It's time to step fully, unapologetically into the illumination of the eternal Word. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Keep thinking deeply, keep seeking the truth, and rest in the sovereign grace of the Creator. We'll see you next time.